good to see you.
Yes, it's really fun to be able to interview you. I mean, I'm very touched. I get a chance to cultivate your story and to listen, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, you are one of those pivotal people in the pre-perinatal space, especially in the United States. You helped form and shape a lot of our early materials, and you've been in partnership with some of our best people, Marty and Ray, and you have your own journey. And I've listened to your journey a bunch of times, and you've helped train practitioners and educate them, and you've created the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute with Marty Glenn and did a phenomenal job just finding the best people in our country to train the next generation. I mean, you've just been pivotal. So we get to hear your whole story today.
Me too. I'm curious to see what comes out.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
yeah, well, we're gonna just go along in sort of a chronological way. And the first question is just around like what was happening around your conception. And like I know you grew up, you said in Ohio and Kentucky, but where were you conceived and what year?
I was conceived in 1951 and in January of that year in Schenectady, New York is where I was born too.
Wow, you're born in New York. Okay.
Yeah, and then moved to Kentucky for a few years and then up to Bay Village, Ohio on Lake Erie for my grade school years, and then back to Louisville until I graduated from high school and went to University of Kentucky. Got my bachelor in nursing.
Oh, that's right. You started out as a nurse.
Yeah.
Well, what were the cultural sort of significant events in 1951, for your parents and for you, for the people at the time? Like what was happening in your parents' world and around you when you were very young?
So my parents met in college just before the war in 42 and got married. And then my dad was a flight instructor during the war.
Oh, wow.
Came back and decided to go into accounting. And by the time I was conceived, he was at the beginning of his lifelong career at General Electric.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was kind of in a upper middle class, fairly white community. My dad was corporate America. My mom was stay-at-home mom. And that was kind of the way I grew up and thought things were, Yeah.
Okay.
And something significant did happen around my conception, but I'd like to bring it in later because it'll have more context then.
Okay.
Just what I discovered during my PPN journey
Okay.
about it. Yeah.
All right. So tell us the names of your parents, Wendy.
My dad is Russell Gerald McCarthy, and my mother is Nancy Ray McCarthy, and both of them have passed. And in fact, my mother's passing, I got to be with her, and it was a real healing of my birth. It was a beautiful healing.
Of course. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we come in and we go out. Those are the two doorways. And you know an awful lot about both doorways. I mean, I think my first experience with you was reading your little booklet, being with babies. And then I read Welcoming Consciousness. I was I saw the early early publications of when you were writing it, when you got that grant. And that was, I don't know, that was a fairly long time ago now, but let's just stay with our chronological idea here. So if you could name the best qualities of your parents, like what would you name them to be, Wendy?
I think both of them in their own way, their best quality to their daughter is that they truly loved me and they truly wanted the best in their own ways for me. And my father was very loyal. I would say, and steadfast. He was a man of his times. Back then you didn't talk about your emotions, and you were kind of in control all the time and positive thinking all the time. And he was very much that. But I think his loyalty to his family. Yeah. And my mom, growing up, and this was a big influence on me. Growing up, my mom was severely depressed. I have an older sister. She was very happy being a new mom, staying at home in the 1940s, very proud of herself being a mom. And she got an obscene phone call. And it brought back memories that she had compartmentalized of abuse when she was a child. And they didn't know how to handle it back then. Psychiatrists said, just forget about it. It's in the past, and started medicating her. So as I grew up as a young girl, my mom was heavily medicated, anxious, depressed, and having a hard time. And going forward, that was so pivotal to me because I went into healing.
Yeah.
Wanting to heal and wanting to understand, and wanting, first as a nurse and then as a psychotherapist. So having her go through so much pain and difficulty was very pivotal in my journey, and come through it, which I can talk about later.
Yeah. Right. So those are some of the significant things that shaped you, growing up. Did you have siblings, Wendy?
I have one. I have one older sister. She's 2 years older than me, Terry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We both went into nursing. She became a nurse practitioner, a pediatric nurse practitioner. I almost went into midwifery. And then after I was an OB nurse, I decided to go, I really want to do more psychology. So I went that route instead of being a midwife. Yeah.
Wow. You both went into the healing profession. Yeah. So it looks like that these were the initial traits that guided you, that the longing for healing. What would you say describes that sort of shaping force for you, Wendy?
I didn't realize it more until I was older. When in high school we had to decide what we were going to take at school, I think I very unconsciously went into nursing. It was a very unconscious decision. And there I was in nursing. And in a lot of ways, it wasn't really who I was. It's very interesting until I came to OB. And then all of a sudden I came to my OB rotation. And I said, well, this is the only thing I'm interested in. And so I ended up getting a job. My first job was at University of Kentucky Teaching Hospital, seeing very high-tech tertiary care. And what was also very interesting at that time was there's a major midwifery school in Berea, Kentucky, and they had an experiment going with the university where they were teaching their midwifery students in our unit too. And so I'd be with deliveries and births. See, their languages, I'd be with deliveries. And then when with the midwifery, I'd be with their births, so I got to see both worlds. And I was very uncomfortable. That's the word. I was very uncomfortable and didn't understand why in the hospital setting, how the whole thing was set up. I didn't know why. But after that, I decided to go into public health, a maternity team, led a team there. And I was always interested in, this doesn't feel right. Something's got to feel more right. I want to learn more. And so that's when I went and got my master's in a really, at the time, this was back in 77, the innovation of looking at babies and moms mainly. But it was when they were first starting to really assess during nursing time. And and I've forgotten a lot of the other things, but it was the first time they were really looking deeply at relationship between the baby and the mom, and the traits of it and how to support it. And infant stimulation programs were coming online. And so I got my master's in family studies and human development, but I got to TA with a woman who her specialty was infants. And
Who was that?
Lisa Barkley at the University of Kentucky. And that was, she'd asked me to go get the research on this and go get the research on that. And so I was right at the cutting edge of the current research at the time. So that was another important piece. And it literally wasn't until I got the next piece, which I really realized I wanted to go into doing therapy rather than physical nursing. And I moved out to, I was married at the time, and I moved out to Los Angeles and went to USC and got my PhD in counseling psych. And it was when I was doing all my own therapy and healing and that whole process that I looked back and I understood more about my mom and my dad and how important healing was to me, and that I wanted to help people. So it wasn't until later that it kind of came into me. Oh, that's my path. Oh, that's why I'm here, kind of thing. So.
Well, that was at USC. So what was the formative energy there for you? Was it, did you have teachers that were really formative for you, or the whole program?
It
And
was.
what year was that?
Yeah. At the time, I'm even forgetting, God, getting old.
Me too.
Yeah. It was very existential. The whole philosophy at the school was existential. A lot of the way that they taught was very confrontative to people. It's interesting because so many times I would learn my way by, this doesn't feel right. What would feel more right? And again, in fact, one of my teachers failed me in my practicum because I wasn't confrontative enough. And I was too, quote, soft on my clients.
Wow.
Wow is right. So, it's kind of like just this age they were going through, and this is how you do it and stuff like that, who was very formative. And I don't remember his name quite yet. Maybe it'll come in. But I was very attracted to Gestalt therapy.
Fritz Perls or?
Fritz Perls, but I had a very high quality trainer. And I had 5 years of intensive training. I did group, I did personal, I did my all my marriage and family license training under him for 5 years. I mean, 3 times a week at least, I was in it. And it really taught me how to be very present in the moment and be very aware in how to be in relationship again, both with myself and with others, and to track that. And the other thing it really brought out was the appreciation of being with your full range of emotions authentically. And just learning how to do that, because I didn't as a child or adolescent growing up. So that was a very good foundation for me when I went into being a psychotherapist and later on. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you had the early years of forming that relational field, like knowing how to really create safety and appreciation of what that person's been through and the full range of their experience, and you could hold that as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really rich. And that was, were you in your early 30s then, or I'm trying to imagine.
Let's see. Yeah, mid-30s. And I finished my dissertation and graduated in 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And that year is when I started my practice. So I had the other major formative thing for me coming into PPN was I had always, there were two interests growing up in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought I'd be a mother and have my own children. And having a child was just central after I got pregnant. I mean, after I was with my husband, after we got married. But we kept putting it off because I was in school and putting it off because he was in school and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was in high school, my family wasn't really that religious. They'd taken us to a Christian thing every now and then, but they didn't really continue it. But I independently found a Christian church, and it was like something in me lit up, and it was my spirituality and my relationship with the divine. What's so interesting was I was really devoted for the first, from 9th grade to 12th grade. And all of a sudden in 12th grade, I had this awakening that what I was hearing, that there were parts that weren't right for me, that I needed to search further. Mm-hmm. And I literally dropped out for several years and had this deep mourning of that spiritual connection, but nothing felt right. Mm-hmm. And it was during that time that I went ahead and finished my PhD. And it was also during that time when my husband and I did start trying to get pregnant, didn't get pregnant, and he had a test done, and he found, we were shocked, he had no live sperm.
Wow.
And he, after getting it diagnosed in that, he had had some illness when he was early adolescent, and it was a permanent condition. Wow. So I felt just compelled to have a child. And that was back in 84 that we learned that. And we decided to do in vitro. Well, we decided to do a donor. Right. And I started on this whole path of donor. And this is before I got to APA and PPM.
Right.
So for years, I went through 7 years of infertility work, trying to get pregnant, 2 surgeries, and had a failed IVF when their sperm specimen had no live sperm in it. So
another one.
After, yeah. And I had the surgery and they didn't know it until they were about to do it. So there's a whole huge story in that I'll leave for some other time. It's very rich, but it's beyond what we should talk about today.
No, but it was formative for you. It was, it's an imprint, it's a shaping force. I mean, I'm sure it's another layer that contributed to
totally
wonderful things that you've done in your life, you know.
Yes. So, but during that infertility, I started wanting to know what's more, why is this happening? And I started doing more metaphysical things. Like I had a tarot reading and I had another kind of reading, and I started getting into metaphysics. And then I started by just looking at all things through direct experience rather than, let's say, a system being taught, you know, like the church and stuff. So that was very much a part of, very active during my infertility. And actually the infertility was a big part of getting me back into spirituality. So my husband and I decided finally, I had some experiences where I got the whole picture of why this was happening. And decided not to try and get pregnant, but to adopt. And we were all the way through the process. The baby was born in the NICU, and the parents decided they didn't want to give the baby up. So it was
So
devastating.
devastating.
It was devastating. 7 years of this devastation, So a lot of my working with mothers and families, really, I had so much experience in that world of fertility and infertility and IVF and donors and loss and failed things and, all that kind of stuff. That was something that I brought a lot of depth within me. Fast forward to 89, and that was the year that my life went on a different path.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a very, very low point, and I remember being in my bedroom and saying, I need help. I absolutely need help. I am lost. And two things showed up in my reality within 24 hours. One was an APA Congress flyer.
Yes, I've heard this part of your story once. Yeah.
Out of nowhere, it showed up. I was like, what is this? And, like you've heard me say, and it's so true. I looked at it and I thought, well, I've been in psychology and I've been in, pre and perinatal world, but I have no idea what pre and perinatal psychology would look like. And I remember seeing William Emerson's presentation of psychotherapy with a baby. And I thought, what is that? And I made a choice because up until that time, it was too painful for me to be around other people having their babies.
Right.
I had separated myself off for a few years and just thought, well, I'm just going to go into general practice and not have kids and, all that. And I saw that brochure and I went, wow, that looks so interesting. I don't know if I want to go. And I just felt this real choice point. And I said, no, I'm going to go. And then once I went there and I really felt that change within me, I made the conscious choice to go deep into the field and, never look back. And also within that time, the other thing I got within 24 hours was a book called You and Your Higher Self. And it was a transmission from Lazarus, who is a non-physical entity that came through for 40 years. And what he said, something in me clicked, and I felt a familiar essence. And I started delving into that, and it just absolutely, the two of them went together for me. And it was a very cosmic, galactic, but embodied way of experiencing further realms within myself.
Well, what was the familiar essence like? Tell me about that.
A deep sense of love and a deep sense of I found my roots. And part of what he taught was more of our stellar history. And what I discovered in our meditative journeys over and over and over again was more and more of my stellar origins and my coming in here. So I was working with a much bigger picture that felt so right. So it was so much more inclusive and whole. And then I had friends, we were really deep into experimentation. I had friends that were mediums. I had friends that were channels. I had friends, we would do all kinds of between the realm experimentations and go to people who, that was their expertise and their gifts. And so I was exposed to a lot of things between the realms, and it all just felt so natural to me. What was challenging was I didn't want my pre and perinatal professional career and the message I was trying to get across poo-pooed, because I was really outside the box over here at the time, and I was concerned about how to openly bring them together.
Right.
So a lot of it was just through the basic principles and who I was that I brought it through that way. rather than talking much about it or explaining it or trying to bring it into my writings then. So when I, let's say, wrote Welcoming Consciousness, although it was so much a part of me, that was a hard part for many, many years. And I know a lot of people have that, you know, they have experiences that are so far ahead or outside. How much do we bring in? How much to express? Where do you bridge to people who that isn't their world at all, but you want to bridge and meet them in their PPN world? So that was a major part of my 20-year period there in that way.
Well, you worked very hard to ground your ideas in science, and you found like the Ken Wilber ideas of consciousness, and you really worked hard to define consciousness, and you approached the near-death aspect. It gave people a place to stand or purchase in the paradigm, which was that was one of the stories I'd like for you to tell. And the other story I love hearing over and over and over is when you first saw William working with the baby and how couldn't unsee it.
Yeah.
So would
that
you
was
tell?
That was kind of the pivotal where my life changed, and the pivotal, I got it and I could never not get it again. So for me, you know, here I was in this very tender, deep, heart open, but difficult period. So that's who I was going into this APA meeting, and worked with Graham Ferrant on cellular consciousness, did some of my own egg and sperm journey consciousness, which just blew me away, especially when I asked my mom about some things about my conception and journey, and was right. She had never talked to me about it. I was like, oh, this stuff is so real, you know.
Oh yeah,
which
very
we all
healing.
go through, you know, coming
very
into this,
healing.
you know. But I went to Williams, and William, you know, had really pioneered, not only one of the pioneers of doing pre and perinatal work with adults for, you know, thousands of adults, but he was the one that asked, wait a minute, couldn't we do this with children? And then came up with a way of doing somatic play work with children that could access and help process and heal, you know, pre and perinatal. And then he did it with infants and babies, you know, very young babies from time they were born on up. And so that was when he was describing some of his work. And then he showed a video of him working with, I think, around a 3-month-old baby. And he had the baby, can you see me this way? And they were talking very gently and very directly about when he was born, and it was difficult. And he was very empathetic. He was very compassionate, gentle, slow, loving. And William was just saying, yeah, you had a difficult birth. Yeah, that time. And he saw the blotches, skin memory, body memory, somatic memory of when a cord was wrapped around very tight around the baby. And so he just touched the baby. Yeah, right there. It was really tight. It was really tight, wasn't it? Yeah. And he was so empathetic, and the baby was so present and looking at him. And that's when I just dropped in, and I could feel this whole realm of consciousness in the baby, and how William was tapping a whole nother level that we usually had never recognized. I had worked with many, many babies in my career already, and I'd never experienced that. And it just sent kind of shockwaves through me. And what I really got was, and I used to write about this and talk about it anytime I taught, is what we grow up believing. What we believe babies to be is oftentimes who we see them as. And once we really break through or dissolve some of our conditioned beliefs and lens, like William had, to go much deeper and to see them as a conscious being that was capable of, like what our field now believes and is steadfast. When he opened that window, I could tap into it, the field of it. Mm-hmm. And that changed me. And I said, oh, I want to learn more. I want to learn more. I was kind of aghast that as a nurse, I'd done so many of these things that hurt babies in the hospital, not knowing. And I just said, I want to learn more. And that's when, boom, full force into pre and perinatal, trained with William, trained with Franklin Sills, met Ray. Do you want me to go into that a little bit now?
Sure. I mean, I think we're at the place of like, as you grow, who are those people that helped you and what are the important lessons that you learn?
Yeah. So William, so much, I'm so grateful for his pioneering. I mean, he was such a true pioneer, farther than anybody else. And, when I think of what it takes to be a pioneer, a pioneer just says, I don't know. Okay, do I want to do this? Okay, this is important. I mean, I never felt I was the best person to do anything that I did. I always could see someone else that I thought they'd be better at that than I would. But I'm the one showing up and I'm going to do it, kind of thing, and saying yes. And I want to say just both William and Marty, this was so much a part of who they were. Marty, so I'm going to jump out of sequence, but let me just name the sequence. So met William in 89. By 93, I had already been training. I already had a practice for 3 years working with toddlers doing the play therapy, birth play therapy. I had decided to videotape all my work so I could watch it slowly and fast and transcribe every session. So because I knew I was missing so many things because of my conditioned way of seeing. And sure enough, when I spent the time to really analyze everything, I'd say, oh my gosh, the child picked out that symbol when the parent was talking about that over in the room and the camera's on the child, and I missed it. And then he went through the tunnel that way, and oh my gosh, he was showing us exactly what happened. So by going really in depth with each session, that was my training in so many ways. And then in 93, I met Ray at Franklin Sills, 2-year craniosacral therapy training. And Ray and Franklin and I were like, we need to be training people. No, there's no place to train people. And Ray and I lived close enough, and we said, well, why don't we start? Why don't we open up? And it ended up being called Beba. And why don't we open up a nonprofit teaching clinic where we invite families to come in, not charge them, and ask them to stay until we graduate the baby, until we feel. And we could kind of go through slow-mo without worrying about, is this person going to bring their baby back? It was a wonderful way of learning without the pressure of a private practice, let's say.
Yeah.
Upfront, ask the parents, will you see this through with us? And everybody did. And we videotaped all that. We developed the work more and more. We combined working with babies and then with kids in the somatic, and we evolved it. And one of the things that I just want to get in here, I feel was one of the most important ahas that, each of us, whether William or Ray or me or everybody else, all of us doing it, we get these major ahas where all of a sudden we jump a level. And for us, we had worked we worked as co-therapists for, I think about 4 years. And for us, we saw so many children, or babies, should I say, that would move away from their mom. And then as they sat out there separate, and looked at their mom and started coming back, there'd be so much more emotion and so much more pain and difficulty. And even like, I don't know how to do this to get back, even though they had just crawled over there and they were looking back and could crawl. There was this imprint of not coming back. And we were seeing this over and over again. And realizing it was something. But it was at the time when the self-attachment film by Reichardt came out. And I remember sitting in Ray's room and someone said, hey, you should see this. And we looked at it about the self-attachment journey and we went, oh my gosh, that's the imprint that we're seeing in all these babies. This journey all the way back. And we're seeing all the disruptions and things that happened after the baby was born until they reconnected or didn't reconnect. Mm-hmm. And that shifted a whole level of how we could work so much more precisely, let's say, with greater understanding with the babies. And that was one of my favorite things that I took from that. Ray and I went, he kept Beba and worked with his training program beautifully. And I went back into private practice. And soon thereafter, Marty Glenn asked me, she had this crazy idea of starting a graduate institute and crazy. And I would say to her, I remember we met at I didn't know her. I just met her once through a mutual friend. And she called me up and she said, would you have a Thai lunch with me? And I said, Thai food lunch. And I said, okay. And she came with a notebook, a white notebook, thick. And she said to me, I want to start a graduate institute because we have to have graduate studies in pre and perinatal psychology. And would you help start it, but would you do the pre and perinatal? And Judith Weaver, they were also going to do somatic psychology. And the three of us really worked together to do that. And Ken Brewer was her husband was the chief operating officer of the school. So the four of us wrote it into being over a year. And Marty and I did the pre and perinatal 6-degree programs. And
wow.
The thing about Marty that I learned, because I was always more careful and wanted to know where I was going, having everything organized, then take the next step. And Marty wasn't like that at all. Marty would just leap in. And I remember sitting there at lunch going, how do you know how to start a graduate institute? And she said, I don't. She said, but I got a book from them. I put it into steps. We'll just start at the beginning. And, it was kind of, it's like, this is a novel idea. And in the years working with Marty, she always taught me more about being willing to go into the unknown and feel okay about it. I don't know the answers, so let's start. And that is such a big quality for a pioneer, just to be able to be willing to not know anything and just start.
Yes, that's true. And Marty made it fun.
Yes. Marty made it
so
fun.
Upbeat, and she made it fun. And we'd always sing a song.
Yes. And the other thing about Marty that made it just amazing to co-pioneer with her was she was not judgmental. She just, if we goofed on something, which we did on so many things, or something was just way too chaotic and not good enough for students and all that, she'd just go, yeah, that's true. Okay, let's see what we can do about it. And she would just move on. And if I did something that was different than what she wanted or, blah, 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 there was no judgment, which was such a beautiful field. It's like what we want to give our families, everybody that we work with, to have that non-judgmental field of acceptance. This is where we are. This is what happened. Let's be with it. And, and it's just an openness of being able to come through something, process it, forgive, and accept and just be more. And that was a real gift from Marty, and still is. I mean, she and I, we still get together and we laugh and think about all the things.
Yes, it's fun to be with her. But you and Judith and Ken and Marty created something that, I mean, all of us wanted to go. I mean, I remember going to the BJ Lyman,
Yeah, BJ came in just a little bit later, and then she became the chair of the department and was instrumental. Yeah.
I really wanted to go to the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. I was one of those people that go to the website all the time and look at it longingly. I had little children, I couldn't go. But yeah, I remember watching all the programs develop and all the people that talked there, and I had this great idea of this campus with a library and all the classes and things. I mean, I was to sit there and think about it. It was a beacon. It was a place where I could go with my imagination, and it inspired so many of us. And so, that was a really big deal, and I guess that provided inspiration for so many people, Wendy, and it still inspires people. I mean, there was a lot of sadness when it continued.
Which is what we wanted, and we wanted to give people more the tools and all that. From the inside out, being a pioneer, trying to put together the pre and perinatal higher education was really humbling.
Yeah. Yes.
Because at higher education, the expectation that it is built on a foundation of experience, and at the time, very objective standards were being used for what constitutes research.
Yeah.
And very Newtonian, very physically based. And we just didn't have it in our field. We had a lot. Our field was so rich in clinical experience. And we did have some writings, and thank goodness APA had a journal, and we had some things. But it was very challenging trying to put together curriculum that was adequate enough to be at that level. And it was a strain not only on all of us teaching, but it was also a strain that being pioneer students had to live with coming through. And it's not easy. It was not easy, and it was more chaotic, and it wasn't as perfect as, let's say, an early development thing that people had been teaching for 20 years and had research and all that. So it's kind of having to go through the fire in pioneering. And for me personally, I was very much like David Chamberlain. He kind of was the consciousness guy at the time, the original. He was the consciousness. Dr. Verney was so much more the scientist in some ways, and biologist scientist in some ways, foundations. But David Chamberlain from the very beginning would talk about how conscious babies are and consciousness. And I identified with that a lot. And because of my spirituality, and I was dealing with consciousness all the time, it was very comfortable. I kind of held that end of the field in a lot of ways back then. And of course, my book, Welcoming Consciousness, how this came to be was when we started the school, we had to come at it with pre and perinatal, and then early development, what's out there, since we didn't really have it. We didn't have models and all that. And so here's all the traditional stuff, but it didn't explain anything that we were seeing. So there was this gap, and we had to teach both, because we needed to have people understanding what's out there now and understand the gap. But we didn't even have an early development theory or model that incorporated pre and perinatal. And that's when I got the grant to and I worked for a year on doing all the research of how could we even articulate it in a way that's had to be psychological and consciousness studies based, that could hold pre and perinatal to somehow speak and grow the field. And that's where welcoming consciousness came in. When I started teaching the first courses, what I realized, I was teaching pre and perinatal findings in our field, but that only worked if I taught it within a consciousness model. So I remember one day having this aha that we were really teaching consciousness studies. Mm-hmm. And we needed to be talking about consciousness studies to be able to support our findings with babies. Mm-hmm. So many times, especially back then, many people would talk about babies are conscious, see how conscious they are, and just practice it. But they wouldn't talk about consciousness because it was kind of too far out, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt like I just was holding my own, so to speak. We need to bring this in. This is the higher truth.
Yeah.
And we need to ground it in that. And so that was one piece I think I was holding firm to, and in my writings and things like that.
Yeah, you did.
So
it was really important that we had that portal. I remember talking with you about it, and you said, yeah, I had to have the near-death aspect because people can understand that or yearn for understanding of that on that end of life.
Right.
So it gave you a way to segue into the beginning of life. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes.
And there was a whole field of consciousness studies that was very grounded and was very well developed. What was interesting was they had a gap, and the gap was coming in. Yep. They had, at that point in the 80s, they now had childhood spirituality was becoming a topic of, I remember presenting at a childhood spirituality conference. Their gap was, they kind of pick it up during childhood. And I would say, hey, we have a full circle, and this, and pre and perinatal brings in that all this is going on, preconception forward, of the soul coming in, and all that we know and how we can help during that time, even before we get to supporting children, fuller consciousness. So during the years from, I'd say, 94 to 2014, those years, I very consciously tried to bridge to other fields via going to and speaking at conferences and that. So I'd go to the consciousness oriented, like the shift, and I'm blanking on some of them right now, but would present at those. And then I would go to the newest way of working with energy that I found was extremely effective and very elegantly efficient, was using energy psychology techniques, healing techniques. So I got training in that. And then for years, I went to their conferences and kept saying, hey, look at pre and perinatal imprints. That's where the beginning of these are. We can use these tools on this. So, and early development, and trying to go into the early development practitioners and theorists to say, hey, we need to go earlier, So that was one thing I very consciously tried to do, was put seeds in other fields where the pre and perinatal really needed to be part of the story.
Well, did those seeds take root?
I would say that I've been humbled by how much it hasn't yet.
Yeah.
And it, we're in such a profound, unique paradigm shift. And, it's almost like we can feel it shaking, the old paradigm and the new paradigm, and then, and I do believe we will reach a point with a new standing wave where it will be the most natural thing in the world, but it's still not. I think it takes a lot of people doing it over and over and over and over and over again. So it takes a lot. Even some of the, I've met a lot of high power healer shakers out there, and they know of my work. They've even read my work, know PN, but when I see them present, they're still talking about childhood patterns as the core patterns, for instance, things like that. So it just takes a lot. It feels like, on one hand, and when we were teaching the school and people would start getting so excited about, and everybody in the field can, I think, relate to this, get so excited about the field and want to go tell everybody, and then they start telling people, and then people don't get it, and they or they or all that kind of stuff, and say, how do you do it and not get discouraged? And I come back to one-on-one, or if I'm teaching, and we all, for those of us who teach, have this experience, we're out there teaching, and some people get it, and some people wake up, and some people take off with it, and that's it's just part of the journey. Some will, some won't. And I think all of us have had the experience where 5 years later somebody comes up to me and said, I wasn't ready to hear it then, but oh my God, and then they got it. And that they realized was a part of the beginning. So both are true. Yeah.
Well, you have been one of those people that have really built and so much of the early development of our field. I mean, I know William's our grandfather pioneer person, but you came along, you and Marty and Ray. I mean, you all sort of are, I figure, in that same cohort of practitioners that really grew the field, and so we're just so very grateful to you. I feel like I'm heading toward the end of our interview here, Wendy, so I'd like to just see, is there any other part of your professional life or your personal life that you would like to share before we complete? Because I did want to hear about the energy psychology piece. I know that that's one of your big passions now, and that I know that you sort of grew through working with babies and running the clinic with Ray, and you taught a lot of practitioners, and you developed your guiding principles, and you still have work that you do with Marty. But I don't know, is there any other part of your life that you would like to share about?
And I still have private practice. A couple of things, come to mind. So as I developed more and more, I got interested in working earlier and earlier. And two aspects. When working with consciousness, and you've heard me say this when I teach, but I like to include it. So when Ray and I started working together, he was, he's the somatic genius. I mean, he was so gifted. And he's so loved to get his hands on babies. I kid him about that. He just couldn't wait to be able to do some somatic work. So oftentimes most of the time when we were working together, he would be the one taking the lead doing the somatic work with the baby. And I would be sitting in the room, and I would just be going into the slower tides, and I didn't have a name for it back then, but what I was doing was opening up to what I came to call the family field, which that field of energy in the room and not in the room, but the field of energy of this family, and the baby, the mom, the dad, and everything else that they're attached to and reference from. And as I would do that, I found for me, I got so much more information coming through then when I actually started doing somatic work, I would lose that information. I would be somatically following, but and maybe if I had continued that, I would have been able to bring it all together. But for me, I just loved being, and remember all that Gestalt therapy and all, my spiritual practice and all that came into being, where I just tap in and something would come up, I'd name it, and then boom, that was the place that needed to be, held or heard or things like that. And so I developed my ability to do off-body reading and working. And whereas Ray developed more the somatic, but also his way of tapping the field for sure. What I want to say to people is, it took me quite a long time to feel that what I was doing was as valuable. Because the whole history in the field in this line was somatic based. And I told myself, if I didn't do it that way, I was not doing it the right way. And it's so easy when we get training with people that's the way we do it, whether it's cranial sacral, so many people train in cranial sacral, but then they find they need to work a different way. Mm-hmm. And I saw this with students and other people that I've worked with, other professionals in my mentoring, is oftentimes people will slow down or dim their gifts coming through by feeling that they need to do it in a structured way that's been precedent. And for me, it's so important as a pioneer or anyone is to find a balance of really supporting, allowing your personal gifts come and supporting them and exploring them and having respect and, being with what has been. So as I allowed myself to just go more and more, that's when and I just so happened in the mid-70s started working by phone with people that saw me doing presentations and wanted help and weren't in town. So I developed a way of working distantly.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And
wow, that was really prescient because that became so the thing during COVID. That's how we did things.
Yes. So I was doing that in the late 90s.
Wow.
And early 2000s. That's when I was learning all the EFT and TAT and a lot of those methods. And I found I could do them on the phone. And what I found was I could read the field mm-hmm. as if they were in the room. Mm-hmm. I could read, what was going on with mom. I'd say, okay, just like so many of us have developed that now. So I was developing my skills of doing it distantly. And then I found I really like doing it that way. I mean, I like in person, and then when, before even COVID, I could also read and bring in the consciousness of the baby and help. So we could do I just learned how to do it distantly. So mm-hmm. Then I decided I really wanted to work during pregnancy because I really believed really hooking up the consciousness with mom and dad much more deeply and doing the healing work with the baby involved in the session consciously mm-hmm. was where it was at for me. That's kind of the leading edge. And I do a lot of work now with parents, preconception, connecting with the soul, coming in throughout mm-hmm. the pregnancy. The births are very different. It's just a beautiful, beautiful way of working, and it all works distantly. Wow. So that's kind of like where I'm at. But then lastly, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been training in a whole different energy system called the Christic energy system. And it goes way beyond anything else I've ever seen out there. And I'm incorporating that into my work with babies. It goes way beyond energy psychology. It works with our divine blueprint and how to help align with that, how to work with ancestral soul tree, like from other lifetimes, purpose in this lifetime, how to do the imprint healing right at the beginning. That's now I'm feeling so much fulfillment because I'm able to work at this very large self level with families and babies coming in. That's very integrative, much more integrative of their higher self and soul than before. And that's what I'm pioneering right now, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, I'm excited about it too. Let's talk more about that later. But wow, that's exciting. Okay, so to complete for our interview today, what a message would you give to people, young people now, young generation of professionals, scholars, academics, lay people that are coming into this field? Like what messages would you give them now?
Oh, I'm so grateful for you coming into our field. Number one, I'm so grateful. Yes, welcome. I'm so grateful. Let me just get quiet just for a sec. Number one, don't skip over yourself. In other words, all the work and sessions and focus on my own pre and perinatal experience were so foundational, and getting it embodied is so important. Don't skip over that, and just start working with other people. It's just for your own benefit and everybody that you work with. It's just such a rich part of our field. Take full advantage. Yeah. And secondly, one of the things I've done over the years is mentor a lot of professionals who want to start incorporating pre and perinatal into their practice. And oftentimes people are afraid of being different. They're trying to mesh it in and bridge it into kind of come in under it and just quietly do it. I have found, though, that oftentimes that tension within themselves of knowing so much more, being able to do so much more and not being able to speak it, has a toll on people. I really hope, and I do think generationally, we're at a different point. I just really recommend going for your gifts, going for where you feel the highest truth is, where you feel you flow with truth and wisdom and love, and practice from there and attract people from there.
Yeah.
Be very clear and upfront about your values, your perspective, what you offer, and let people come to you. And not everyone will, but a lot of people will. Let yourself thrive in your practice rather than trying to fit yourself in.
Right. Nice.
That's my recommendation. What do you think of that, Kate?
Well, that's what I do.
Good. Yeah.
And I teach from love.
Right.
It's the love that fills me up and allows me to do what I do, and I can't be any other way. But then that's me, Wendy. I don't compromise for better.
And that's why you're one of the pioneers too.
Why I'm a pioneer. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
But I don't think about that. What I think about is what I love.
Yes.
And I was ignited by this field in 1999, and I've never looked back. So it still leads me. And I love teaching. I love learners. And so I teach from love, and that's given me a lot of happiness. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think your advice is really good, and how to help people feel comfortable with their love. I think that's probably where we should go, because not
Mhm.
everybody's comfortable. They think they should get ahead. They have to make their name for themselves. They have to be seen. When I think that's what they're taught. If they could just sink into what they love and let that love shine, then they will attract what and they'll form themselves in that way. Yeah.
And I would broaden love to what's my highest truth that I hold right now to be true, let's say about babies or whatever it is. What's the highest truth? And what embodied wisdom do I already know? You know, over the years, so I think that the feedback I've gotten the most when I present and people hear this material is you just seem to embody it. You know, you're not afraid, you just feel like you come across as I know this. I this truth, this wisdom, this great love. And when we embody it like that, even if it's strange topics, people feel that. Like you
Yeah.
said, love. And I would just add the wisdom and the truth and be bold.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Be bold, be fearless.
And say yes. I mean, that's one thing
Yeah.
you did. You know, last thing, and well, I know I keep saying last thing, but like I said, I never felt like I was the best person to do the job, but I was the one that said yes.
Yes.
So with Ray, you know, starting Beba, said yes. With Marty, said yes. With Welcoming Consciousness, I was like, oh my God, you know. And I was butting up against Ken Wilber didn't believe what I believed. You know, some of the top people out there did not believe what I was going to be putting in the book. And I just had to say yes to what I believed was true. And to say, yes, I'm going to take it the next place. And you know, like when you came in and became director of education at APA and said, yes, I'll put the work in because it takes work. Yeah, a lot of hours, a lot of dedication, but I'll say, yes, I'm going to do it. And then if it ends up, it's not the perfect yes, you say yes to the next thing, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It paid
yeah,
off. Really paid off for everyone.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad.
yeah.
I got to know you, and Wendy, I mean, I'd like to reflect back to you something that you haven't talked about, which I really think needs to be said and known.
Mm.
That very few of our practitioners bridge the space between energy, somatics, and then the cognitive, really important skill of writing. And you have that. All your case studies, your capacity for story, to find the research to support it, to document it, to put it in book form and article form. There are very few practitioners in pre-perinatal that do it as well as you do. So I would hope that for the young people coming, that they would please consider also like embodying and embracing the two sides of them, that the energetic, spiritual, somatics, and the capacity to write and express, because our field does need scholars, and you're one of them. You're one of the few that really was able to document and express that our work, we need more. So
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
people,
if anybody wants to read a lot of my stuff is kind of scattered all over. So I keep saying I'm going to put them up on my website. I still haven't. You know, I've been saying that for a long time. But if anybody wants to email me, I do sell quite a bit of my papers. And if they want to get I want everything kind of to read up on my work, please just email me. Can I say what
yeah, please.
DR as in doctor, drwmccarty@gmail.com.
Yeah. So yeah, and your websites are Welcoming Consciousness or Beginning?
No, the website is luminousbaby.love.
Oh, nice.
It's where I'm going to be building out the website, but it's got my newest energy there. You can,
Okay.
and
All
it's
right.
all about supporting the true self coming in. The luminous baby, which is the light of its truest self, how to support that wholeness of that original blueprint in the self. So,
All right. Well, I'll definitely make sure that that's in the show notes whenever, what I know that we'll be publishing this, but there are just a few more questions I wanted to ask. The next one is, like, when you look back on your career and all the things that have happened, and a lot has happened, and you've been at the very front of it, what would you change if you could go back, if anything?
I just wish I could have done more. It's always a sense, I wish I could have done more. I wasted this period of time, or I worried about this too much, or I limited myself too much, or I got caught up in the human drama kind of stuff, or politics, that were going on. I mean, there was a lot of back stuff going on in trying to start the Graduate Institute. It was just a lot of friction, and just getting caught up. I just wouldn't pay attention I just wouldn't bring as much attention or care about it as much. That's one thing. Anything else? Yeah, I would have done more. I wish I had written more. Yeah.
Well, there's still
I'm
time.
still cooking. I haven't written for a while,
Mhm.
but I do plan to, but
Yeah. Well, we're lucky that you're still with us and still doing wonderful things, Wendy and McCarthy. So, is there anything more you'd like to add before we stop for today?
I'm grateful for everybody in our field. It's just so nice to feel. Nice isn't quite word. It just warms my heart. Anyone who's in our field, because we do hold this precious truth and wisdom and love for babies. I do want to mention the website 12 guiding principles -ppn.com.
Yeah.
So and just to quickly orient people, welcoming consciousness is my developmental theory and model, which I wrote so students would have a lens to think about and consider pre and perinatal and talk from. But after that, our field had so much clinical experience, but a lot of it was trauma-based and needs not met based. And Marty and I said, hey, we need our field. What do we stand for? What do we feel is important? What do we put out as a positive message? And we were interacting with a lot of people out in early development fields. And we wanted to come up with a set of principles or truths. Many of them are principles of truth about babies. And so over a year, I headed up a grant project. Many of the people like Ray and Mary and other people that were seeing babies at the time, we all came together and wrote these 12 guiding principles and published them. And they have now been, they're now in like 5 different languages, and you can download the flyers for them. We really made them so people could give them out to parents and things like in their groups or their practices and that, and just say, this is what the field has found and what they value in helping, human potential. So that's a great website to go to. I hope everyone, so it's 12 is the number 12 guiding principles -ppn.com.
Okay. Well,
All
we'll
right.
make sure we'll put it up so that you'll see we'll weave all this together in such a glorious fashion. It'll be like a tapestry of your life and the things that you've done. So
Thank
it'll
you.
be, yeah, it'll be a wonderful little gem for people to see and appreciate and get to know you and all the things that you've helped, plant the seeds and grow into, fruition, and they're still growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming and being
Oh, thank you.
our Hall of
It was
Honor.
really fun
Yeah,
connecting with you again, and just thank you for everybody coming and listening to my story.